Welcome to the TMRN Time Monk Radio Network. Today is Saturday, the 12th of November, 2011. I'm Gemini, and we are honored to spend an evening with Green Witch Susun Weed, who will be joining us for a discussion of the wise women's way towards natural health, nutrition, medicinal plants, and other very sage topics. Susun has spent 46 years studying, teaching, and sharing her knowledge and wisdom. She is the author of 5 books, including Healing Wise, New Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, Breast Cancer, Breast Health, The Wise Woman Way, Wise Woman Herbal for the Childbearing Year, which is in its 29th printing, and Down There, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way. Susun has taught at countless workshops and seminars across the country and has been a guest on numerous radio and television programs, including NPR and NBC News. She is the founder of the Wise Woman Center, Ash Tree Publishing, and the voice of the Wise Woman tradition. Susun is a high priestess of Dianic Wicca, a member of the Sisterhood of the Shields, and a peace elder. I encourage all of our listeners to explore and learn about Susun Weed by visiting her website, www.susunweed.com. Hello, Susun. We are delighted to have you join us this evening.
Green blessings. I'm so glad to be with you.
Thank you. The WebBot Forum administrator and producer of the show is Fox, and he will be doing the recording and technical support of the show. Several members of the forum were kind enough to join us this evening. Please welcome members Green Meadow, Paul D., and Neil. For our listeners, this interview will offer wise woman advice and discussion for those that are interested in our green allies and a natural approach to living and being. Susun has links to books, teaching, upcoming seminars, and decades of knowledge at her website, www.susunweed.com. This interview will be available on YouTube and for free on the WebBot Forum channel and at the website webbotforum.com. Susun, are you ready for the interview?
I am indeed.
And our first question is from Neil.
Hello, Susun. I have a question here from forum member Peace for Gaia. She says, I am interested in what you would recommend as a good starting place to learn about edible wild herbs and plants. Sadly, I think this might become important knowledge in the not-so-distant future.
Well, my first response to that is this is important knowledge right now, because the plants that grow around us constitute what I call people's medicine. I believe that herbal medicine is people's medicine. It's the medicine that truly is our birthright. And I personally do believe that my thoughts are powerful and that what I think I create. And so I am actively involved in thinking about and creating a wonderful future. And certainly plants are part of that wonderful future. There's a couple of places to start. Today at the Wise Woman Center here near Woodstock, New York, in the Catskill Mountains in the Hudson River Valley, we spent the day working in the gardens. We cut down the nettle, we put the gardens to bed, we raked up the leaves, we moved compost. We did a lot of work in those gardens, and then at the end of the day, we washed our hands and we went out, and here in the middle of November, we harvested wild greens for our salad. We harvested ground ivy. We harvested garlic mustard. We harvested wild oregano. We harvested chives. We harvested wild mince. We got a wonderful amount of wild plants that we could put right in with our store-bought lettuce and had. And we put some lemon balm. Of course, one could say that it's a cultivated plant, but the truth of the matter is I've never planted lemon balm. It just grows around me. So for me, it's a wild plant. And that's where I suggest that people start, is by learning what plants grow around you, picking them, putting them in your salad, and remembering that there's no nutrition of any kind available from raw food. So in order to get the nutrition from our wild plants in our salad, we must add at least 2 tablespoons of oil or half an avocado to each serving of salad.
Thank you for that.
Susun, next up we have Green Meadow.
Hello, Green Meadow.
Hi, Susun. It's good to talk to you. There are some common ailments that seem to come up over and over, and I would prefer to know how to treat them myself versus going to the doctor. How do you treat common problems such as fever, respiratory infection, vomiting, diarrhea? Do you have a good resource on this information that you can recommend?
Well, the first thing that I have to say is that I don't treat problems.
Okay.
And I don't treat problems because problems don't exist.
All right.
People exist, yes?
Yes.
So if we treat vomiting, well, we're treating what? A concept?
Okay.
Because each individual person who's vomiting is vomiting for a different reason. So we could just be the heroes and ride off to war against all problems, or we could be a wise woman and say, is what's going on with this person already healing? So I don't treat problems. I treat people. That said, there are a few herbs which we can talk about in general due to their wonderful effects no matter who the person is.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the herb slippery elm?
Yeah.
Yes. Ulmus fulva. A beautiful tree till the blight gets it, and they don't get very big anymore, and they like to grow by water. And the inner bark of the slippery elm was one of the first kind of big question marks for me as an herbalist, because I read that in places where slippery elm grew, native people would harvest the inner bark and put it aside in case there was starvation during the winter, in case there was a long, hard snowstorm or a blizzard. They couldn't get out, and their food supplies were running low, and they considered a 6-inch by 2-inch piece of slippery elm bark to be adequate nutrition for an adult human being for up to 40 days in a row.
Wow.
And I wrote to Dr. James Duke, who was then with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and I said, my gosh, what's in slippery elm that it can, sustain life like that? And he wrote back and said, I don't know. And it got him to thinking, too. And so Dr. James Duke now has the world's largest database of the constituents of plants. So if you want to know what's in slippery elm, he can tell you now. And what we can tell you is that slippery elm is a nutritive herb. It's a bland herb, and it's a mucilaginous herb. And what this means is that it's slippery, it's slidey, it's not a stimulant, it's not a sedative, and it's going to build. That really is what distinguishes the wise woman tradition, you know? The scientific tradition measures and fixes. The heroic tradition balances and cleanses, and the wise woman tradition nourishes the wholeness of the unique individual. I prefer to take slippery elm by making it into like a slippery elm pie dough. I just add honey to the slippery elm powder until it's the consistency of pie dough, and then I break off pieces of it about the size of a macadamia nut or a hazelnut and roll them in some slippery elm powder, which is what I've been using, so they don't stick to each other. Store them in one of those tins that you get candy or breath mints in. And anytime I'm feeling a digestive distress coming on, I'm going to just take one of my slippery elm balls and let it slowly dissolve in my mouth. If I feel nauseated or like I'm vomiting, I know that slippery elm will coat and soothe my system and help stop vomiting that isn't necessary, but not interfere with vomiting that is necessary. If I'm constipated, I know that slippery elm will gently increase peristalsis. It coats the intestines and ends leaky gut syndrome. It's really a heaven send for people with Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, and yet it's mild enough to be used for babies with colic. A real general purpose. Anybody can use slippery elm safely, mixed up with a little honey, and simply dissolved in the mouth.
Well, that's helpful.
So that's one of your difficulties, perhaps, dealt with. And then what was the second one in your list?
Fever.
Once again, fever rises from a great many different things, but in general, what we can say is that fever is how we get well. Without fever, we would simply die. Most bacteria and all viruses that I know of cannot replicate, cannot reproduce themselves at temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So the primary immune system response to an infection with bacteria or a virus like the common cold or the flu is to turn up the thermostat and burn them out. When we go running in with herbs like white willow bark, an antipyretic, a fever lowerer, what we're actually doing is depressing the immune system and making ourselves more vulnerable to the next cold or flu that comes around.
Okay.
Again, that said, there are situations in which fever can be a threat. In the very old and the very young, fevers of 105, 106 degrees can actually cause convulsions. It's rare for death to actually come about due to convulsions, but you never know. And it's certainly scary for the people around them. So I rely on elderflower tincture, which resets the fever control mechanism in the brain, allowing the body to continue to run a fever high enough to kill bacteria and viruses, but encouraging the body itself to reset and to bring the fever down to a reasonable level. I was reading in a book quite the stirring story of the first person who received penicillin, and they actually had to use all of the penicillin in the entire world for this woman, and she had been running a fever of 104 degrees for 50 days. And she was the first person to be given penicillin, and that penicillin did what her immune system couldn't do, which was to kill those bacteria, which were obviously heat resistant, and to restore her to health. Perhaps elder grows nearby you. Perhaps you've heard about elderberry, which is actually an antiviral, but the elderflower tincture does a different thing, and a different thing than any other herb that affects fever, most of which are diaphoretic. And a diaphoretic is a plant that heats up the body so much that you begin to sweat. And this is actually most dangerous in the very young and the very old, the very people who we would most want to have a treatment for if they're running a high fever.
Okay, thank you. And what was the name of the fellow that lists the plant constituents?
Dr. James Duke, D-U-K-E.
So does he just have a website you can look things up?
He does indeed.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Green Meadow. Now we have Paul.
Hello, Susan. This is Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hello, it's good to speak with you. Can you describe how to prepare tinctures, oils, infusions, vinegars, all the good stuff for us beginners and newbies that want to know the differences between them and just at least the basics on how to prepare some of those?
Okay, so the first place that I would send you is to YouTube. And at this point, I think I have about 200 YouTubes showing me making various things with various things. Right? Dandelion flower oil, poke root tincture, just a huge number of different nourishing herbal infusions I'm making. I don't even personally know the names of every one of them, but you go to YouTube, you will find those. The second thing that I could refer you to is learningherbs.com. And this is an excellent website that is set up specifically for the beginning person who just wants to learn about how to do some herbs. And it's run by John Gallagher, a really wonderful herbalist in the wise woman tradition. And it is not the wise woman's tradition. It is not the wise women tradition. It is the wise woman tradition, because woman includes man, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It's not exclusive. So that's why it's the wise woman tradition. No possessive, no plural, just the wise woman tradition. And John Gallagher works in the wise woman tradition and runs learningherbs.com. And then the third thing that I could offer you is my course, The ABC of Herbalism. It is a correspondence course, and we engage in this through the mail, and it covers 52 of my favorite herbs and how to use them, as well as 20 common difficulties that you may encounter and my take on those difficulties, as well as your beginning assignments for working with a green ally. You also get with this correspondence course a book list, and you get to choose $100 worth of books. You get an audiovisual list of DVDs, CDs, audio tapes, and MP3 files of me, and you get to choose $50 worth of those. You get a set of herbals that I have hand-selected for you, and you get 3 hours of my time to ask me questions, just like what we're doing here tonight.
Great. We'll check out those sources.
Thanks for asking.
How can, following up with that green ally, which I've heard you speak about before, how can we develop our plant communication skills? You know, sitting down and getting some of that information directly from the plants that I've heard you speak about before.
I'm happy to, but the difficulty is that it's so simple you won't believe me.
It always is.
It always is, isn't it? You know, the first that I heard from the plants really was when I spent the summer in my teepee. And I was sleeping on the ground. And you know, when you're sleeping outside, if you're inside, you think, oh, outside must be so quiet. But, of course, outside, especially in the country, is very, very noisy. And I, soon became accustomed even to the whippoorwill who went on night after night to those noises. And then I heard, all the monsters crashing around at night, who I soon discovered were actually quite small animals. And then I began to hear and in my mind, I said, is someone laughing? And in my mind, the answer came, yes, we're laughing, the plants. And thus began my apprenticeship and my learning from the plants themselves. And I asked the plants, I said, how can people do what I'm doing? And they said, it's very easy. Take off your shoes. You must walk barefoot. Do not put yourself in small metal boxes that go in high speeds, and do not sleep in rooms with corners. Now, of course, the difficulty with that prescription is that the vast majority of us are doing all of those things all the time, aren't we?
Yes.
We are sleeping in rooms with corners. And I think about how many of the indigenous people of the world have dwellings that are round. Or, like even a longhouse didn't really have corners, although it wasn't strictly speaking round. And how rare it is for there to be corners in nature. So that told me something very important. And then I thought about what happens when I put myself in a small metal box, or even a big metal box, and move very, very, very fast. And what happens, I think, inside me is that I become so speeded up that it's impossible for the plants to communicate with me. The plants already have to go as fast as they can possibly go to meet even the slowest human, because we are going so much faster than them. So one of the primary things that we really can do to be more in touch with the plants is to go at their rate. And one of my teachers told me that a tree exhales all day long and inhales all night long. And that's one of the reasons why trees live so long, because they breathe so slowly. I don't think a botanist would necessarily agree with this. I think this is more evocative than scientific, but it certainly is evocative, that living outside, that sleeping in the teepee, for me, brought me to that quieted, slower state where I didn't need to have new stimulus right now, new stimulus right now, new stimulus right now. I sat at airports, and I have counted how long an image is on the television, and it's rare that there's an image on the television for more than 2 seconds. It's very difficult when we need something new every 2 seconds to be able to hear from the plants, which might breathe once in 24 hours. As for taking your shoes off, the truth of the matter is everybody can do that. You don't have to walk anywhere. Plants didn't say you have to walk around barefoot. They just said you have to be barefoot. I remember Sun Bear. And really, busy high-level executives and CEOs would come to Sun Bear and say, well, I need you to know something. And Sun Bear would say, okay, you're going to have to wear loafers to work. And I want you to get a kitty litter pan and fill it up with dirt. And then when you get to work, I want your shoes and your socks off, and I want your feet in the dirt. And they go, what? Yeah, got to get you grounded here. So you just bring that tray of dirt to work with you and slide it under your desk there. Nobody will know. But you got to get your bare feet in the dirt. Otherwise, you're just going to, work yourself to death here. So we don't all necessarily have to bring a kitty litter pan of dirt with us to work. But could we spend 5 minutes a day with our shoes off and our feet on the ground? I think most of us could. I think about the woman who showed up at one of my classes a little bit late, and she was clearly really shaken. And I asked the class to wait for a moment, and I took her outside and asked her what had happened. And she had just been on the road, and right behind her in the flow of traffic, there was a major car accident with several deaths. And she was very shaken, as any of us would be. Even hearing it kind of shakes us up. And it was a December evening, and there was snow on the ground, but there were some shrubs where we were, and the earth under the shrubs was bare. And even though it was very, very cold, I had her take off her gloves and put her bare hands on the earth and give that all to the earth. And she was able then to come to class and to be here, to be present, and to really be coherent. And the earth is really our healer. The earth is here for us. So whether we are interested in science communication or not, I think that we all need to be interested in bringing the energy of the earth into our bodies. And I've saved the best for last. It's something I found out on my own, or maybe the plants just let me think I found it out on my own. I really can't tell the difference. But I've known for all of my life, and you probably have too, that the air that I'm breathing is made by
the plants.
That's right. So every time I take a breath, I'm actually taking in plant breath. And the stuff that I exhale is used by what?
The plants.
That's right. So every time I exhale, I'm giving something to the plants. So I call it the giveaway dance between plants and people. Every breath out is a gift to the plants. I send them my gratitude. Every breath in is a gift to me from the plants. I take in their joy at being alive. And again, how blissful it would be if we could walk through our days aware every breath, gratitude, joy. But even if we only stop and take 5 minutes out of our day to breathe with the plants, this cracks open the door to the plants communicating to us. Good question. Thank you for asking.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Paul. Next up is Green Meadow.
Hi there. Can you give us your top 3 herbs for healing tendons, ligaments, and joints?
No, I can only give you the top 1.
Okay.
Will that be acceptable?
That'll work.
Okay. Remember comfrey. Comfrey is symphytum. Symphony means to come together. So comfrey is symphytum, that which brings things together. Comfrey causes certain tissues of the body to become stronger, more flexible, and smoother. And those tissues are the skin, the bones, the ligaments, the tendons, and the mucus-covered surfaces of the respiratory system, digestive, and reproductive system. Additionally, although you didn't ask, I can't resist mentioning that there are important proteins in comfrey that are used for building short-term memory cells, and that's why I always say to remember comfrey.
Wow.
I use Symphytum uplandica X. Let me explain that name. Most books, including my books up until recently, cite comfrey as being Symphytum officinale. And officinale is a species name that means an official medicinal plant. And so that seemed reasonable to everybody, and certainly seemed reasonable to me, until a kind of whole hoo-ha-ha about comfrey came up, and people saying, oh, no, Symphytum officinale can cause harm. So I began to investigate this because it seemed very strange to me, with so many people talking about using so much comfrey. And I didn't know, whether to just say, well, you don't really know what you're talking about, people who say that there's harm, or if I was to say, wow, how did we not notice this harm before? And I wound up at Richter's in northern Ontario, Canada. And Richter's a wonderful place. They sell herb seeds, herb plants, and even dried herbs, as well as a great variety of books. They're really into herbs, and they ship all over the world, so don't worry if you don't live in Canada. Richter's, it's like Richters, Richters. And I have no financial interest. They're just a really excellent place. So I was teaching at Richter's, and I asked if I could see the comfrey, and they said, well, what comfrey do you want to see? I said, oh, you have different kinds? They said, yes. So I went out to their show garden. They grow out almost every single one of the plants that they sell and grow out their seeds as well. And there I saw, for the first time, Symphytum officinale, which is a small plant flowering at about knee-high with yellow flowers. And I said, well, that's not the comfrey I have in my garden. Oh, that one over there, that's the comfrey I have in my garden, which is a tall plant flowering at head-high or even higher, with flowers that can be purple or bluish or pinkish or even sometimes white or cream colored. They run through a kind of range of colors. And they said, oh, that's Symphytum uplandica. And it's a Symphytum uplandica cross done by Henry Doubleday, who did dozens of crosses to get rid of the pyrrolizidine alkaloids in comfrey so that comfrey would be safe for food and medicine. I said, well, that's what I'm growing. Now, insofar as I can tell, and it's hard to get information from many of the suppliers, Symphytum uplandica crosses are the only thing that's in cultivation. They're what's on the market, even though it's all labeled Symphytum officinale. I can tell you that I personally have drunk at least 1 quart of comfrey leaf. And I'm using the leaf, not the root, comfrey leaf infusion. I've been drinking at least 1 quart per week for more than 30 years. And when I have an injury to bones, tendons, ligaments, skin, mucous surfaces, or just want to remember more, and I drink more than 1 quart of comfrey a week. I actually had my arm torn off. Everything was torn. It was inside. The skin was intact, but everything inside was ripped off, tendons, ligaments. And I was drinking, anywhere from 6 to 8 cups of comfrey leaf infusion almost daily for 6 to 8 weeks. And I have far greater mobility, flexibility, and strength, and then I'm the people who haven't been injured. So comfrey certainly gets my vote of respect for its ability to strengthen and heal, and I am not the least bit concerned about it being a problem.
Okay, so this alkaloid in this new version is not necessary?
Henry Doubleday lived in England and did primary research work in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and is, to the best of my knowledge, dead. We want to call something that was created in the mid-1940s new. I'm all for it.
Okay. All right.
But personally, I wouldn't exactly call it new.
Yeah.
Since we're talking, 65 years?
Yeah.
Since he did these crosses, these hybrids, and possibly even more. It might have even been the late 30s. I'm not totally certain on the dates. Pyrrolizidine alkaloids are alkaloids that can occur in plants and can cause hepatic venous congestion. In other words, they cause the vein leaving the liver, the primary vein leaving the liver, to swell up so that liver function, of course, goes down. The truth of the matter is we have never seen any adult human deaths from this, although we have seen one woman we think was reacting to comfrey pepsin pills, which contain comfrey root. Comfrey pepsin pills, and she was taking about 10 of them every hour, and she did get some hepatic venous congestion there. But when she stopped taking the pills, everything returned to normal. There are two neonatal possibilities. In both instances, a pregnant mom was using comfrey root, either comfrey root capsules or comfrey root boiled down into a decoction toward the tail end of the pregnancy. And one of the babies was almost immediate death within hours postpartum. The other one hung on for a couple of weeks. And we're pretty sure that their deaths were due to hepatic venous congestion there. But again, that was comfrey root. That was comfrey root in capsules. I never use herbs in capsules. That was comfrey root boiled down. I don't use comfrey root at all, and certainly if I was going to use it, I'd use it only externally. And what I'm suggesting is comfrey leaf infusion, not a tea, not a tincture, but the infusion of the comfrey leaf. I make an infusion by weighing out 1 ounce of dried herb, 1 ounce of dried comfrey leaf, putting it into a quart jar, filling that jar to the top of the boiling water, screwing a tight lid on it, and letting it steep like that for at least 4 hours, better overnight. Then I strain that out and drink the infusion, refrigerating what I don't drink right away and doing my best to drink it up within 2 days.
Okay. And then we had another member, Operation Thunder Monkey, who wants to know, are there herbs that you can combine with comfrey to slow down its cell proliferation action? Would you want to?
I was trying to find some polite way to say balderdash.
Okay.
Absurd, crazy, nuts. Where on earth did this flying monkey ever get this idea?
Couldn't tell you.
It's just absolutely bizarro is all I can say. So let me be a little clearer, and I do apologize, Monkey Man, if I've offended you in any way, but that really is not a good idea at all. That you're going around here with the comfrey. Drugs are purified concentrated substances that have a direction of action. Herbs are unpurified, unconcentrated conglomerates of constituents that act not in a linear fashion, but in a global fashion. So in trying to figure out, like, what is the man thinking about? If there's a puncture wound or a deep gash, there's possibility for tetanus to be introduced into that puncture wound or that deep gash. And tetanus is an anaerobic bacteria. That means it thrives in the absence of oxygen. So if we put something like golden seal on the outside of that wound to make it seal over, then we can actually get tetanus because the tetanus was somehow introduced into that wound. And so maybe he's heard something like that you don't want to, heal over the top of a wound if it's a deep wound. But we're talking here about using comfrey internally. For deep internal healing, and when there's things on the outside of the body where there are those deep wounds, gashes, and so on, I have other herbs that I would use. I wouldn't use comfrey externally.
Okay. And then kind of a follow-up on something you said. Could comfrey halt or reverse Alzheimer's?
At this point, we have to understand that Alzheimer's is only diagnosable by autopsy.
Yeah.
And so we go back to where I think you and I started, which is I don't treat diseases. So you're asking me if herb X can treat disease Y.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? And what I'm doing my best to tell you is that herbs are unique conglomerations of constituents that can have a large number of different effects, and that in the wise woman tradition, we are not out to do battle with diseases. We are not out to kill every disease. We are here to make peace with ourselves and our bodies, however they are operating. My mentor, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who worked almost exclusively with people with terminal diagnoses, used to say to us, "You're not okay, then I'm not okay, and that's got to be okay."
Yes.
So what I'm offering you, what I'm opening the door to for you, I hope, is to lay down your sword.
Yes.
You don't have to kill every disease in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm
Let's nourish.
we're
let's
so in
nourish
this culture. It's
Yeah.
Okay. My next
When we
question
took my
then.
dad to France, every morning we ate, breakfast in the same cafe in Paris every morning, and every morning my dad would look around, roll his eyes, lean over to me, and say, "Do you notice that all the signs are in a foreign language?" Every morning I would say to him, "We're in Paris, France." He would go, "Oh, we're in Paris, France. Very nice." But, it wasn't like classic Alzheimer's, because we could sit him on a park bench and say, "Watch the pretty girls, Dad. We're going to the Eiffel Tower. We'll be back in 2 hours." And he'd be sitting right there in 2 hours. He'd say, "Saw a lot of pretty girls." I am one of my sweethearts, a wonderful, wonderful woman that I've been, deeply connected to for over 30 years. Her mother hated me. But her mother's Alzheimer's finally got her to the point where she completely forgot who I was. And then we had a really marvelous time. It was so homophobic, she simply could not cope. And, she just, totally forgot all of that. It was, just fabulous. We had, a lot of good years with Fern's mom once she really started forgetting stuff.
Wonderful. My next question is, Lipitor is the number one prescribed drug in the United States, but recent articles have said that while Lipitor actually lowers cholesterol, it doesn't actually lower heart attacks, the rate of heart attacks. What do you think actually improves heart health, and are there any blood tests that you find useful in understanding a person's health?
Good question. And we need to turn the clock back again to the Framingham Heart Health Study that was done in Massachusetts. So we go back, 50 years or more to one of the major studies that was done. And if you actually go and look at the data, what you find is that the people who were eating the most animal fat were the least likely to have heart attacks. And that the amount of cholesterol in their diet had basically no bearing at all on their risk of heart disease. And Sally Fallon, that's Fallon, at the Weston A. Price Foundation, it's westonaprice.org, has a video called The Oiling of America, in which she brings forth some pretty staggering information about the corn industry and how the corn industry distorted the facts from this study and made it seem that butter especially was a threat to health, and that corn oil and margarine made from corn oil would be healthier. And this is the beginning of what Sally calls the oiling of America. In fact, nothing could be worse for the heart than corn, unfortunately. And what has happened over the past 50 or 60 years is that animals that we eat are increasingly being fed corn. And corn actually changes the nature of cholesterol and the nature of fat in the body. So do vegetable oils. In fact, when we look at indigenous diets, we find that most indigenous people eat as much animal protein as they can get their hands on, whether it's meat, blood, milk, cheese, yogurt. This is like the highest quality food, and it's actually associated with low heart disease risk, low cancer risk, and great longevity throughout the world. What is true about the fat in these animals, however, is that it has a ratio of 1 omega-3 to 1 omega-6. Omega-3 and omega-6 are both essential fatty acids. We hear a lot about omega-3, but we don't hear very much about omega-6. And that's because omega-6 is the wicked sister, shall we say. Omega-3, we know, promotes heart health, but omega-6 drives inflammation. And most of the oils that are supposed to be rich in omega-3 have, by factors of 10, sometimes by factors of 100, more omega-6 fatty acids in them than omega-3 fatty acids. So for heart health, what we want to do is to choose full-fat organic dairy products and meat products from animals that have been pastured rather than grained. And we can then know that we are keeping our hearts optimally healthy. In addition, of course, we all know that exercise moves the blood through the blood vessels, and that is a major factor in keeping the heart healthy. We are designed to move. We are designed to run, to walk, to lift, to squat. And so many of us now work at jobs that are mentally exhausting, where we use our bodies little or not at all, so that we're discouraged even from using our bodies when we're done working because we feel too tired, even though it's more of a mental tiredness. I am very much in favor of the treadmill office. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's a wonderful idea, and I truly hope that it sweeps the nation. Your desk and your computer is on a treadmill, and the treadmill is set very, very slowly. Usually it's set to 1 mile an hour. Now, an ordinary walking pace is about 3 miles an hour. Brisk walking pace is about 4 miles an hour. So you can imagine at 1 mile an hour, you're really strolling down the lane. And yet what it means is that instead of sitting at your desk doing work, that you are active the entire day. If you don't want to invest in the treadmill office, and these are available now, this is not just my imagining, but if you don't want to do that, and of course it would be expensive, you can buy an exercise ball and sit on an exercise ball at your desk rather than a chair. The exercise ball forces you to move, to find your center of gravity over and over again. It's especially useful for helping to maintain good pelvic floor integrity, but also all of the little muscles in your body, especially through your hips and your ribs, have to move and sway to keep track with that exercise ball. As I will admit, one night sitting on my exercise ball, working late, I fell asleep, fell off, and hit my head. These are the kinds of things that I think about in terms of keeping my heart healthy.
Okay.
One of my students called me up, and she was very upset because her cholesterol was high. And I said to her, cholesterol is an unproven theory, just as you're saying. We really just can't make it work out that high cholesterol leads to heart attacks, because it doesn't. I said, so I'm not worried about your cholesterol being high. But, as I was speaking to her, I'm getting a mental image of her. And she's one of those women who, she's a very womanly woman. I'm certainly not saying that she looks like a man, but she looks like a man in terms of she's more weight on top of her body than on the bottom of her body. And medical professionals talk about apples and pears, right? The women are pears, the weight's carried low, and men are, I guess they mean like red delicious apples, the weight is carried up in the shoulders and the chest. And that's where her weight was, up in the shoulders and chest, which is the heart attack area. And she said to me, well, my mom had a heart attack at 53, and my grandmother had a heart attack at 52. I'm thinking, wait, this is not good. And I said, okay, I would like you to go back, and I'd like you to have your C, reactive protein, tested. C-reactive protein is a protein that we find in the blood when there's inflammation of the blood vessels. And inflammation of the blood vessels very, very closely aligns with heart attack. You have blood vessels that are inflamed, you're not going to have a heart attack. My consort had a total cholesterol of over 400 for more than 10 years without ever having a heart attack because his blood vessels were not inflamed, despite the fact that every male member of his immediate family did die of a heart attack. So anti-inflammatories become critically important here. Well, my student called me back, and she said she had a little trouble getting a C-reactive protein test, but nowadays you won't, because now they have a drug to treat it, and back then they didn't. She said the results had come in, and it was really high. And I said, okay. Well, they just did a major study attempting to reduce C-reactive protein with B vitamins, and it did not work at all. So we're going to have to take it to Dreamtime. We're going to have to take it to the grandmothers and ask what we can do here. And she called me back a couple of days later, and she said, do you remember Margaret's song about the linden tree? And I said, ooh, wait a minute. Something about there's flowers, and there's fairies, and there's birds, and there's bees. She said, right. And the chorus goes, linden, linden, heal my heart. You can ring me a brand new start. I said, you called Margaret, didn't you? She said, of course I did. She said, so I'm going to start drinking linden infusion. Now, we don't need a whole ounce of linden. It's a big fluffy flower. So we use half an ounce of linden. Put it in our quart jar, fill it to the top with boiling water, put a lid on it, let it steep for 4 hours or overnight is better. This wonderful YouTube of me and apprentices harvesting linden at a local shopping mall, and a bunch of people coming by and listening in to what we had to say about linden. And, well, yeah, she drank linden. It's world's leading anti-cold and anti-flu herb, a cold preventative, flu preventative. But other than that, we couldn't find too very much in the books about it. And within 6 weeks, she had brought her C-reactive protein down by half. And her doctor was very happy. And that was over 10 years ago. I just got a note card from her the other day and telling me, about all the wonderful things she's doing. So she's well past her mom's age of death. And I think that linden will give us a brand new start.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Other heart-healthy herbs we must mention would include hawthorn, which is the herb for the aging heart. We also say that anyone over 60 should consider making hawthorn an ally. We can make hawthorn leaf and flower infusion, and we can do hawthorn berry tincture and take those tinctures. Just about any way of using hawthorn is of benefit to the heart. And then there's motherwort, Leonurus cardiaca, the lion-hearted. If you ask people in Japan, what do you want to do to live a long time? They say, take motherwort every day. I prefer to tincture the flowering top of the plant rather than to use it in a water base. I find it basically ineffective as tea, yucky as an infusion, and just right as a tincture of the flowering plant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Green Meadow. You can help support Susan by visiting her website and forum at www.susanweed.com. Susan, we're going to move on to the change for both men and women. And my question is, as men age, sometimes starting as early as age 30, their testosterone levels decrease, resulting in depression, weight gain, loss of bone mass, irritability, lack of sex drive, lack of focus in their personal and professional lives, increased risk of cardiovascular issues, etc. I have read that most men do not realize that they are experiencing is from a lack of testosterone. While menopause in women is an acceptable and widely discussed health issue, the male counterpart, andropause, is rarely discussed. What are your suggestions for keeping men healthy and vibrant as they age from an herbal standpoint? And are there natural herbs or remedies that men can take to keep their testosterone levels at an optimal level?
When I read that question, I wondered if this question came from a drug representative.
No.
Every word in that question is a lie.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay. I'm reading to you now from my book, Down There, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way, from the chapter called Testosterone Supplementation. The National Institutes of Health panel concluded 10 years ago that the andropause hypothesis is completely unproven and that testosterone supplementation is uncalled for and unnecessary for most men. Supplemental testosterone is sold as today's elixir of youth. It is supposed to delay or prevent erectile dysfunction, loss of muscle mass, and all the other ills of elderly men. Some men may benefit from testosterone, but very, very few. Up to 15% of healthy men over age 21 have testosterone levels that are more than 50% below the lower level of normal set by those who promote supplementation. In fact, and there's a very long article about this that I reference, when testosterone supplements were finally produced in non-injectable forms, they looked for a way to sell these testosterone supplements, and they decided that they would make up the equivalent of menopause and call it andropause, and that they would say that just as women lack estrogen at midlife, which is a lie, men lack testosterone at midlife, and therefore women have to take estrogen and men have to take testosterone. In order to back this up, they decided to measure testosterone levels in men so that they could set a normal range. And what they discovered was that the range of testosterone in men was quite extraordinary. That men could be sexually active, have good erections, and be absolutely manly with extremely low testosterone levels. And that on the other side of that, men could have erectile dysfunction and very great difficulties with very, very high testosterone levels. In other words, they could not find a norm. They simply made up a normal level in order to sell a hormonal drug. I am so sorry that this man who sent in this question has been pulled in by the lies of the industry. The tests that doctors use to measure testosterone levels, I'm reading from my book again, are notoriously unreliable. Furthermore, a man's testosterone levels are markedly different at different times of the day and different times of the year. The largest and longest-term study showed no improvements in energy level, sexual performance, or strength in men given testosterone supplements. Testosterone supplements elevate the risk of prostate cancer. In men older than 45, those taking testosterone were twice as likely to have prostate cancer. In those younger than 45, those using testosterone supplements were 3 times as likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer, and those cancers tend to be fast-growing, killing cancers. As men age, their blood does contain more testosterone-binding proteins. Thus, the amount of active testosterone does get less as the years go on, but the total amount of testosterone stays the same. This is also true for women. There's no woman who's estrogen deficient or progesterone deficient after menopause. Those are simply lies put up by the drug industry to convince us that something is wrong with us and we need to take their products. For both men and women, Oat Straw Infusion, that's the grass of the plant that gives us the grain oats, Oat Straw Infusion unbinds that bound testosterone. The proteins in the oat straw link to the testosterone binding proteins and thus free up the testosterone that our bodies have already made and allow us to use it to feel heightened libido, heightened sexual pleasure.
Thank you, Susan. Up next, we have Neil.
Hi,
Neil.
Susan. Hi, Susan. Neil here again. I have a question here from forum member Uranus Rising. And she says, in your book, The Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, you wrote about the millions of women who have been through the change as having a very special place in what some call the earth changes, and that by 2013, the sister crones will constitute a great pool of collective wisdom that will be used to guide Gaia and the human species into a new era of global wholeness and personal health. So, would you elaborate on what you see as this new era as well as the role of the sister crones will play in it? And finally, what do you see that this has to offer brother men? Thank you.
Well, I think the statement in a way speaks for itself, and that is that in the United States, every minute a woman turns 50.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're looking at, Japan is already gearing up to have a third of its population be over 60.
Right.
So we are looking at something unprecedented on the planet, been alive than there previously were ever people alive. And postmenopausal women are not to be messed with. A postmenopausal woman is a woman in her full power. She is the one who is going to direct her kick to the part of the anatomy that most needs it and get things done. And she is no longer afraid of displeasing. She no longer has to be a pleaser. She's no longer concerned about, do I look pretty enough? Am I attractive enough? Now she is concerned for the health and the well-being of herself, her family, her community, and her world. And because we have, as I said, literally more postmenopausal women alive soon than generally there have ever been people alive on this planet, we are going to see what Margaret Mead called postmenopausal zest, or Leslie Kenton calls passage to power. We are going to see this zestful power of the postmenopausal women in a great many ways. I don't know if she's postmenopausal, but I certainly could point to the work of Melissa Gates as work that is redefining how we think of money and how we use money to get what we want and how to change what it is that we want.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Neil. Susan, next we're moving on to cancer and other related issues. And in an excerpt from your book, Breast Cancer, Breast Health, The Wise Woman Way, you stated that if a woman has yearly mammograms from age 55 to 75, she will receive a minimum of 20 rads of radiation. For comparison, women who survived the atomic bomb blast in Hiroshima or Nagasaki absorb 35 rads. What advice can you give women for breast care and alternative to yearly mammograms?
You know, the Preventative Services Health Task Force of the United States several years ago came out and said mammograms are useless. And the director of the mammography screening for the entire country of England quit in disgust. He said mammograms are ruining more women's health than saving lives. And this is what the Preventative Services Task Force did. Now, I'm not usually down on things, but I've got to say, this is a bad day for me shortly thereafter. I was thrilled when I heard the news. It's like, at last, the truth is out. And then shortly thereafter, I was plunged into despair when Women of America rose up as one and says, you can't take our mammograms away from us. I thought, my goodness, they're like an abused child clinging to their abuser. Don't they understand what they're being told? Mammograms don't help. Mammograms are dangerous. Mammograms are not preventative medicine. My goodness. I remember reading an article by a radiologist, and she was there when Eastman Kodak brought out the first mammogram machine. And she said to them, you must be kidding. Women are not going to expose their breasts to radiation. Radiation causes cancer. And the representative from Eastman Kodak says, you just watch. We're going to scare them into it.
Wow.
And you know, that's exactly what has happened. Every year, we have a month of fear called Breast Cancer Awareness Month, promoted by Eastman Kodak, the makers of mammography film. For years now, I have been saying it's breast health awareness. The title of my book is Breast Cancer, ? Breast Health, ! The Wise Woman Way. Because we don't want to be scared and thinking we might have breast cancer. We want to be nourished and reassured into knowing that we are, in the words of one of my students, to our breasts, girls, you're in good hands with me. We want our breasts to be in good hands. Now, if you think about it, we're not talking about doing a breast exam here. We're just talking about touching your breasts, just kind of idly touching your breast, you might say, or, you know, like, hey, I'm going to touch my breast here for 30 seconds. 30 seconds, what is that up to? 30 seconds times 30 days, gosh, that's 15 minutes. 15 minutes times 12 months? Wow, that's 180 minutes. That's 3 hours. If I only touch my breasts for 30 seconds a day over the course of a year, I will have touched my breasts for 3 hours. If I go and get a mammogram, that doctor is going to touch my breasts for 1 minute. What's more, 1 minute is 3 hours. Hey, we don't have to be math geniuses to figure that out, now do we?
Right.
We know that 3 hours is more than 1 minute, and that we don't have to look for breast cancer. We don't have to be frightened about it. But if we stay in touch with our breasts, we will know what's going on with our breasts. And in Breast Cancer, breast health, the Wise Woman Way, I talk about herbal oils that we can use to massage into our breasts. I talk about destigmatizing the breasts. I talk about returning the powerful energy of the breasts. As a matter of fact, I've chosen Inanna, the goddess, to be on the cover of that book because she's holding her breasts, one in each hand, and pointing them out to us and saying, "Eat your heart out, boys. Look what I got."
So if you had to choose one of the oils to talk about, which one would you think would be best for breast care?
Olive oil.
Really? Okay.
And the caveat here is no essential oils.
No essential oils?
No essential oils. Essential oils are hormonal disruptors. Essential oils are immune system destroyers. And essential oils kill gut flora better than antibiotics do.
Oh, I had no idea. Interesting.
Essential oils are purified, concentrated extracts from plants. Now, last weekend at my workshop at Rockham Conference Center, there was a chemist in my workshop. And I said to her, "What would you call a purified, isolated, concentrated compound?" And she looked at me and she said, "A chemical." And I said, "Right, that's what I'd call it too." And what do the purveyors of essential oils say they are? The truth. Purified, concentrated, single constituents from plants. They're drugs. They're chemicals. They're not plant medicine. They're not natural medicine. They're not safe.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts on that. I had no idea.
So I do talk about that in my book, using the difference between infused oils and essential oils, and making your own infused oils or buying them from other people who are making infused oils. And most of them are made in a base of olive oil. But if you don't want to make an infused herbal oil, the olive oil itself will be enough. Again, what we're talking about here is being in touch.
Well, thank you very much.
Welcome.
And next up, we have Green Meadow.
Hi there. Our next question's from LG. And medicine seems to go back and forth about the effects of female hormones on cancer, and it makes it hard to know what is a benefit and what is a danger. What are your current thoughts on birth control pill and hormone replacement therapies?
I'm going to give you a long answer to this question, so hang in there, everybody. Let's assume that the female hormone that this person is talking about is estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, men and women have estrogen, testosterone, luteinizing hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone, and progesterone. So those are all female hormones. But we're just going to assume, for the sake of being able to answer the question, that they're talking about estrogen. So let's start here. We have basically 3 different sources of estrogens. Our own bodies make estrogens, and human women make 30 different types of estrogen. There are estrogens that are breakdown byproducts of chemicals and bleaches, and those things are in the environment and in our food, and those are called xenoestrogens with an X. X-E-N-O, xenoestrogens. It means they're from outside. So they're outside estrogens that come in, and they are actually estrogens, and they're active estrogens. And then the third type is phytoestrogens, phyto being a combining word that means plant. So they're plant estrogens, but the fact of the matter is there aren't really estrogens in plants. I mean, pomegranate seeds do contain estrone, but basically you don't really find estrogen in plants. What you find is phytosterols. A sterol, if you're thinking steroid, you're on the right track. A sterol is a compound that can be turned into a hormone in the human body or in the chemical lab. So back in the 50s, we're talking a lot about the 50s tonight, aren't we? Back in the 50s, a very clever chemist, after studying the way that phytosterols are fermented and turned into hormones in the human body, found a way to replicate that process in the chemical lab. And he was the first one who was able to take plants and actually, interestingly enough, plant parts that were often being thrown away that were considered waste, and to use those as a source of phytosterols or phytosterols, as it's sometimes called, and to literally put them through a chemical process that turns them into estrogen, testosterone, and cortisone, as well as progesterone. So we have the four primary hormones that are used now, and they are all made from plants, as it were, but this does not make them bioidentical, as it does not make them safe. So anytime we start adding hormones to the human body, rather than using things like oat straw, which simply free up the hormones that are already there, we're actually playing with fire, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work very well at all. So human women start making estrogen at 20 weeks of gestation. So gestation's 40 weeks. Halfway through gestation, human women are already making 29 kinds of estrogen. Human girls are born making those 29 kinds of estrogen. We make those 29 kinds of estrogen every single day of our lives, from 20 weeks before we're born until the day we die. There's never any day that any woman could be said to be estrogen deficient. Starting at puberty, and for approximately 24 to 36 hours out of each month between puberty and menopause, women make another estrogen called estradiol or estradiol. And this estrogen is to breast cancer as kerosene is to fire. Kerosene doesn't cause fire, and estradiol doesn't cause breast cancer. But you have a spark and kerosene, you've got a conflagration. If you have breast cancer and estradiol, that breast cancer is going to progress rapidly, and it could be lethal. So let's look at these three kinds of estrogens: the estrogens we make, the estrogens that are in plants, but we have to get them out of the plants, we have to ferment them out, and the estrogens in the environment. We can also pool all these together and have another way of dividing them, and that is to divide them into short-path estrogens and long-path estrogens. And what this really means is short-path estrogens are metabolized very, very easily, and they get to receptor sites, and they fill the receptor sites quickly. Long-path estrogens are metabolized through a longer, slower process. So ideally, they get to the receptor sites only to find no vacancy, no room at the end, sorry. Short-path estrogens, you've probably already guessed, are really healthy and keep the body fit and strong. Long-path estrogens, like estradiol, are the ones that cause cancers. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, all of those reproductive cancers can feed on not just any estrogen, but the long-path estrogens. Well, here's the bad news. The bad news is xenoestrogens, those estrogens from the environment, they're long-path estrogens of cancer feeders. Oops. The good news is most of the phytosterols, when they're converted in the body into estrogenic factors, are short-path estrogens. There's a few herbs we're not so sure about, like hops, which you're going to find in beer, black cohosh, we're not so sure about the estrogenic effects of that. But by and large, the plants that we're going to be eating, which are rich in phytosterols, which include every root and every seed that we eat, and remember that seeds are not just like sesame seeds or caraway seeds, but also every grain is a seed, every nut is a seed, and every bean is a seed. So phytosterols are very, very common in the plant kingdom. If we eat a good whole foods diet, we're getting lots of them. If we take 100 women and we look at urinary byproducts that are created when the body ferments these phytosterols into active hormones, the difference in breast cancer rates between the top 25 excretors and the bottom 25 excretors is a factor of 4. In other words, the top 25 excretors are 400 times less likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer than the bottom 25 excretors. If we then give all these women a single dose of antibiotics and measure for these byproducts in the urine, we find none. In other words, we must have active gut flora in order to ferment the phytosterols in plants that we normally eat and to turn them into active hormones. What I suggest for both men and women is to drink a quart of nourishing herbal infusion every day. And I rotate through my 5 favorite nourishing herbal infusions: stinging nettle, the energy of the earth; oat straw for longevity and juicy sexuality; comfrey, makes everything strong and smooth. Remember, comfrey. Red clover, the world's leading anti-cancer herb and one of the herbs that is strongest in the phytosterols. It contains 4 of the phytosterol grouping, which is all that we know of, whereas soy only contains 1. I think there's not much confusion. Soybeans are not good for health, and they may actively promote breast cancer. This is a somewhat shortened reply, believe it or not.
Wow. Thank you.
I actually have a 2-hour class called Phytoestrogens, Friends or Foes. And you can locate that as an MP3 download or as a CD set.
Uh-huh.
This is obviously a very intense topic, one that there is a lot of discussion about. And I can also tell you that for the past 10 years, I have been asking women in my classes if they are postmenopausal to please stand up. I've been asking women if they are taking any hormones, whether a cream, a bioidentical, or a prescribed hormone, to please sit down. I then ask the remaining standing group for any woman who feels that she's missing any hormone of any kind to please sit down. In 10 years, I've yet to have any woman say she's missing anything and sit down.
That makes sense. So you like
I would certainly
nettle?
That at the age of 66, I'm not missing anything at all. And I certainly do not take any kind of hormonal supplement. I drink my nourishing herbal infusions. I rotate through stinging nettle one day, comfrey another day, red clover another day, oat straw another day, and linden another day.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good policy.
In fact, I am so wanting to get the entire world to start drinking nourishing herbal infusions that at my Wise Woman University, my online university, I offer a free course called Drink Your Way to Health with Nourishing Herbal Infusions. There's no cost for the course now or ever. I do not sell any herbs. I'm not looking to sell you anything at all. The healthier you are, the happier you are, the happier I am. I run an abundance-based business. I want to see you healthy and happy. That's my sole goal.
Thank you. I can really hear that in your voice.
So find those YouTubes of me making nourishing herbal infusions. Buy a scale. Join my free course on nourishing herbal infusions. I think you have to go to the wisewomanbookshop.com and look under N for nourishing. I think they didn't think people would find it under drink. So we put it under nourishing. And, I think there's a community of over 2,000 people currently involved in the course. And some of the recent things that I read, one woman said, well, I got my husband to drink these nourishing herbal infusions. He's been doing it for 4 weeks, and his doctor just halved his diabetes medication. And another woman said these nourishing herbal infusions are truly remarkable. I've been drinking them for about 10 days, and I've now thrown away my anti-anxiety medications.
My next question is, what are your thoughts about the causes of cancer, and how do you work to prevent it or treat it?
You better sit down for this one. What is a cancer cell? A cancer cell is a cell that doesn't die. A cancer cell is a healthy cell. A cancer cell is a young cell. A cancer cell is a fast-moving cell. Cancer cells are the youngest, fastest-moving, healthiest, most long-lived cells in our bodies. If they weren't, they wouldn't cause us any problems at all. I think that cancer is a manifestation of our wish to live forever. And that the best way to prevent cancer is to understand we live a limited human life. Back to my mentor, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she used to say, the date of your death is stamped on your left buttock where you cannot see it. She said, now some of you in this room actually have the date of your death stamped on a card which you're wearing on your shoulder. And as I said, she worked with people mostly with terminal diagnoses. She said, but that doesn't mean that my date doesn't precede yours. It just means I can't see my date. So when we truly begin to live with the understanding that life is limited, we can't keep putting it off. there will be an end to this life, then I think we take a powerful step toward preventing cancer. I had two women MDs come out of retirement and drive over 300 miles to come to talk to me at a workshop that I did. And they said, we want you to know that in our experience, the two of us, we believe that cancers are caused by emotions that people do not express. Grief, rage. And she said this is especially true of women, that women swallow and hide their feelings, and they then are transmuted into cancer because the feelings are very active, very young, very hot. And I'm not necessarily saying that I completely agree with them, but I certainly understand what they're saying. In general, cancers, and there are hundreds of different kinds of breast cancers alone, and thousands of different other cancers, cancers are multifocal events. That means there's not one thing that causes cancer, but there's a variety of things. It's kind of like if you're spending the day with a 2 or 3-year-old. You might be happy and joyous, at 70 repetitions of something, but the 72nd repetition pushes you around the bend. Just so it is with cancer and the immune system. It is said that every living human being has cancer cells in their body all the time. After all, a cancer cell is a cell that is somehow mismade, and as we are making trillions of cells on a daily basis, it would stand to reason that even with very good quality control, some of them are going to be cancer cells, and that the immune system usually simply gets rid of those cancer cells. So, in my book, Breast Cancer, Breast Health, The Wise Woman Way, I talk about my anti-cancer lifestyle. I have a whole section there about the things that I do to help prevent cancer. But let's go over some things that we can do, 1, 2, 3, that are really simple, really easy. 1, drink a quart of red clover infusion every week. Remember, red clover is the world's leading anti-cancer herb and a terrific cancer preventative as well. 2, eat more plants from the cabbage family. This would include not only cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower, but also things like rutabaga, kohlrabi, turnips, radishes, even horseradish, bok choy, tot soy, and a wide variety of Chinese greens. 4 servings of cabbage family plants in the diet every week reduce overall cancer risk by 50%. Eat more miso and tamari. Forget the rest of soy. I do not eat any soy at all except for miso and tamari, but I keep miso and tamari on my table, and I do my best to see to it that I eat one or both of them on a daily basis. These are the only foods that have been found to have a straight-line relationship in terms of preventing cancer. So we just said that, wow, if you eat 4 servings of cabbage family plants a week, you reduce your cancer risk by 50%. I bet some of you thought, hey, I'll eat 8 servings and I'll reduce my cancer risk by 100%. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. 4 servings or more, you get a 50% reduction. Doesn't matter how much more you eat, all you get is a 50% reduction. Some things we see a rise up until a certain level. So the more garlic you eat, the more onions you eat, the more cooked tomatoes you eat. Raw tomatoes do not count. Certainly up to a certain level. More tea you drink, up to a certain level. You're going to get kickbacks in cancer reduction there, but you can't go beyond that level. Whereas both miso and tamari, the more that you have in the diet, the more you reduce your risk of cancer. In a study done with this, looking at breast cancer active mice, they actually pushed the diet all the way to 100% miso or 100% tamari, and none of those mice engineered to get breast cancer got breast cancer, although they did die of malnutrition.
Wow. That's a great answer. Those are really useful, doable things to do.
And the last one is eat more lentils. Lentils not only contain phytosterols, which we've just talked about because they're a member of the bean family, but they also contain a repair kit for the DNA. So the immune system, once it finds a cancer cell, can actually repair that cancer cell and turn it back into a healthy cell so long as we're eating plenty of lentils. And there's lots of ways to eat lentils. There's the big green lentils that we're used to in soup, but there's also the little orange lentils, which cook up real fast and can be seasoned in so many different ways. And then the magnificent, they're sometimes called caviar lentils or black lentils or French lentils, and they are just wonderful. When I was teaching in Germany, I did a 3-week intensive on breast health there. for healthcare professionals, and the chef there, a friend of mine, listened in, came and stuck his ear to the door and listened in. And on one of the first days, he heard me talking about lentils, and what a brilliant man. He'd endeavored to service lentils 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for our entire 3 weeks, and we never once said to him, ugh, lentils again.
Awesome.
Truly.
Okay, thank you, Green Meadow. I encourage all of our listeners to explore and learn about Susun Weed by visiting her website at www.susunweed.com. And we're moving on to the survival herbs and health topic. And next is Paul.
Hello, Susan. This is the
Hey.
question. This is the question from Lua. If you are planning a medicinal herb garden for a survival situation, knowing that you would only have access to those herbs and nothing else, can you share with us which plants you would choose for your garden and why? And what would you consider the most important herb to grow if you could only have one medicinal herb?
You could never have only one medicinal herb. Simply poppycock, isn't it? Come on. The herbs that you want to grow in your garden are called weeds. And that's all the more effort you have to put out to get them there.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's what I grow in my garden is weeds. And that's what I would recommend that anybody grow in their garden is weeds.
What should be the ones we look for specifically?
Well, I was teaching down at the University of Texas. There was a group of 40 people, and my class was Weeds in Your Garden Bite Back. And I asked the people there to name the weeds in their garden. It was a regulation classroom. It had a big chalkboard, and I had a piece of chalk, and I wrote 4 columns of weeds in people's gardens. All right, lots and lots and lots of weeds in people's gardens. And then I turned to the class and I said, all right, eraser in hand, let's erase from the board any plant up here that has no use either as an edible plant or a medicinal plant. And one of the voices in the room said, erase ragweed. And from the right side of the room and the left side of the room, and I asked them later, I said, did you plan that? And they said, we had no idea. A man stood up, a woman stood up, and they said, virtually in unison, ragweed makes a great tincture that helps prevent hay fever. So every weed that grows in your garden is usable in some way. I said, well, you know, most of the grasses, I must admit, I feed to my rabbits, so I turn those into meat. But that's still a plant that makes food for me, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And certainly in any survival situation, we are going to be keeping animals because without them, we can't survive.
True. A follow-up to that, can you help us out with herbs that work synergistically with each other to bring out healing powers better?
I am a simpler. I'm also simple, or even a simpleton. We always tell the apprentices we're all bozos on this bus, and I have no problem with admitting that I am a know-nothing bozo. I love Bernie Siegel's editorial. It was called, I am nobody with nothing to give. And so, you know, what can we say? You know, we are all in the process of learning. And the primary things that I think are important are to drink a quart of nourishing herbal infusion every day and to harvest some weeds and throw them in your salad every day.
Simple enough?
Simple enough, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Thank
well,
you,
thank
Neil.
you.
Thank you, Paul. Up next is Neil.
Yes, Susan. I have a question here from forum member Ethel Farm. If and when the economy, the infrastructure fails, there will be millions of people with various chronic diseases such as diabetes, epilepsy, and heart problems who no longer have access to the big pharma medications that have controlled these conditions. Do you have any recommendations for people, at least for these 3 conditions?
As I said earlier, I'm actively involved in envisioning a wonderful future. I don't see any reason why anything should fail or collapse, and I'm certainly not putting my effort into that. I do believe that the very best thing for someone with diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, is insulin. If we're talking type 2 diabetes, which is a completely different thing, then certainly there is a lot to be said in terms of both preventative and other strategies that can help us deal with that. I coined the word complementary medicine many decades ago because I didn't like the warfare between alternative and standard medicine, and I thought that was kind of silly anyhow, that we should just all get together, because after all, wasn't our goal the same? That was healthy people, a healthy planet. So that word complementary medicine has now been replaced by integrative medicine, and I like that word even better. And I do work with the 7 medicines: serenity medicine, story medicine, energy medicine, lifestyle medicine, alternative medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, and high-tech medicine. And every single one of these 7 medicines is important. A friend of mine called me from the hospital. She said, my goodness, she said, I was having a massage. The massage therapist suddenly screamed, turned white, called the ambulance, and they hauled me off. She felt my intestines burst under her fingers as she was touching me. And in the hospital, they've removed a piece of my intestine. And I wanted to know what you could tell me about, getting better. And I said to her, you've been complaining to me of intestinal pain and problems for 10 years, and you have done nothing during that 10 years of any kind to take care of yourself. As a matter of fact, you have repeatedly told me that you are not going to give up any of your bad habits. I said, so thank goodness for modern medicine, which is there to take a scalpel, cut us open, cut out the piece of the intestine that has burst because you haven't tended to yourself. So the truth of the matter is, if everything collapses, then those people are going to die.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Susan, it seems like a trip to the dentist is something most people loathe to do. What are your thoughts as to the herbal remedies for keeping our gums and teeth healthy? And what do you see as the most important thing we can do for long-term oral health if one doesn't have access to dental care routinely?
Get access to dental care. Dental care is the single greatest thing that has increased longevity and healthiness in industrialized countries. Whatever you have to do to get dental care, scrub the dentist's floor, get good dental care. You loathe going to the dentist? Get over it. Take something that makes you happy. Get laughing gas. Do whatever you have to do, but get yourself to the dentist on a regular basis. Do you know that 100 years ago, the vast majority of Americans did not have a tooth left in their mouth after the age of 60?
I did not know that.
Do you know that one of the leading causes of death from heart disease is gum disease and cavities?
Yes.
Get yourself to a dentist. Get over it. Figure out a way to love your dentist. Make your dentist your best friend. And meanwhile, we talked about the problems with essential oils. Well, what do most people do when they get up in the morning? They brush their teeth, and what's in their toothpaste? Essential oil. Whether it's from the health food store or the drugstore, you got essential oil in your toothpaste. Cut it out. Don't do it. Use some yarrow tincture. Use some echinacea tincture. Use some baking soda. Use a tiny bit of salt. Use plain water. Stop using toothpaste because the essential oil damages your health. Usually followed by people rinsing their mouths with some kind of mouthwash that contains essential oils. Whether it's from the health food store or the drugstore, you got essential oils in your mouthwash. Don't do it. You feel you need a mouthwash, dilute some echinacea in some water and rinse your mouth with it. Dilute some yarrow tincture in some water and rinse your mouth with it. Put a little bloodroot tincture in a little water and rinse your mouth with it. All of these things are proven antibacterials, and they also strengthen and heal the gums, and they are free of essential oils. Let me say it again. Love your dentist. Enjoy your dentist. Get good dental care.
Thank you. I actually love my dentist, so appreciate hearing that. And then my next question are the cleanses that we hear from a lot of herbal practitioners in different areas and health food stores that recommend that we get cleanses. What are your thoughts on those?
Your body is not a toilet, and it does not need to be flushed. The scientific tradition of healing measures and fixes. It is run by fear. Come and get a mammogram. Aren't you afraid you might have breast cancer? The heroic tradition, often called alternative medicine, balances and cleanses. It is run on guilt, blame, and shame. If you're sick, it's your own fault. You should have thought better, eaten better, done better. Why are you sick? Because you're a filthy, toxic mess, and we must cleanse you. The fact of the matter is that cleansing anything that's alive destroys it. Suppose I went out into the forest surrounding my home and started picking up every stick and every leaf and swept the forest floor bare. What would grow there?
Nothing.
It's pretty obvious to anyone that I would have killed my forest by cleansing it. I used to teach at the Rocky Mountain School for Botanical Studies, still would, but it's closed. And the woman who ran it was very much into a liver flush. And she had her students, most of whom were in their 20s and 30s, do liver flushes. And one of the people that I knew very well who worked there said that his estimate was that 1/3 of the students had emergency gallbladder surgery because of the liver cleanse. Let me put it to you this way. There is no place in the body where toxins are stored or could be stored as a general rule. Now, there are certainly specific things like lead, which is a heavy metal, which can interfere with us. Cadmium, mercury, radiation is held in the body. Heavy radiation is a lifetime event. Once we have that radiation, we can never get rid of it. Right? So there certainly are those things, but again, those things in general are there. We're not going to get rid of them by cleansing. Here's a study that I thought said a lot. The chemicals that we're most concerned with are oil-based chemicals, and they are the xenoestrogens we were talking about. They can really impact our health. And they're also called persistent organic pollutants, or POPs. And they took a group of ordinary American men, and they measured POPs in their blood. And then, in a controlled setting, they let them have American food to eat. Just the ordinary kind of American food that most Americans are eating out there. Hot dogs and hamburgers and fried chicken and all that kind of stuff. Pizza and soda pop. And that's what they ate for a week. And at the end of that week, they tested POPs in their blood again. It was the same as it was at the beginning of the week. For the second week, they let them eat the same foods, but this time they couldn't eat as much as they wanted. As a matter of fact, their diets were restricted. And they were getting 1,000 calories a day less than they actually needed to live on. And at the end of that second week, they measured POPs, and POPs were almost double in their blood. And then on the third week, same food, and they let them eat basically what they wanted. At the end of that third week, the POPs were back to baseline, what they had gotten at the very beginning of the study. In the fourth week, they again reduced their calorie intake, dropped it down by 1,000 less than what they needed, and measured POPs at the end of the fourth week, and the POPs were now 4 to 6 times greater concentration in their blood than they had been. They continued the study. And by the last time, the concentration of POPs, persistent organic pollutants, in the blood was 15 to 20 times greater. So what we can say is that cleanses preferentially free up the very chemicals that they are supposed to get rid of, make them active in the blood. And when we get off of our foolishness of cleansing, then those POPs go back into the fat cells where they are stored and can no longer do us any damage. And that is, in fact, why they are stored there, so they can't injure or damage us or our health. For 10 years, I asked as many surgeons as I possibly could who had looked at the inside of the human colon, and nurses as well who'd been present at the surgery, to tell me if they'd ever seen anything stuck in the human colon. They all laughed in my face. What a stupid question, they said to me. Where did you read that? How absurd. Don't you realize that the entire lining of the intestine is replaced every 24 hours? Which is why cancer drugs, which are designed to kill the fastest replicating cells in the body, have such a major impact on the digestive system, because the entire lining of the digestive system is replaced every 24 hours. No, nothing can ever be stuck in the colon. There are no toxins in our liver, and sweating does not remove anything except needed mineral salts from our bodies. The Wiseman tradition nourishes the wholeness of the unique individual. Rather than cleansing, what I suggest is that you drink a quart of nourishing herbal infusion every day. Drink your way to health.
Wow, thank you. Next up is Green Meadow.
I had a question about what role do enzymes have in health? I've heard we have less ability to make enzymes to digest food as we age. I've also heard that some foods deplete enzymes and some have their own. It's one of those mystery subjects to me. What should we know about enzymes?
Okay, the first thing you need to know about enzymes is that enzymes are proteins.
Okay.
So they're not some strange foreign compound, they're proteins. Enzymes are proteins. Okay, so the second thing we need to know about enzymes is that we are bags of them. Every single thing that we do is enzyme mediated. The release of ADP from the cell is enzyme mediated. Everything in your body is enzyme mediated. You are enzymes. Once you stop making enzymes, you simply die. So, again, a bunch of bluster and baloney here. I hired an internet researcher and paid her a pretty fancy fee for 3 hours of research to find me any scientific study showing that any enzyme in any plant was active in human digestion. After 3 hours, she could find no scientific study of any kind that showed that. And she gave me a 4th hour free because she got fascinated by it. And in that 4th hour, she found a study that showed that all enzymes in plants are completely destroyed by hydrochloric acid in the stomach. And, of course, that would make sense now, wouldn't it? If we are bags of enzymes and our immune system basically is deciding what's me and what's not me, then the enzymes that are me, and the enzymes from plants aren't me, and so they drive the immune system utterly nuts. And the enzymes that got into my body would damage my immune system, make my immune system work too hard. So my stomach kills the enzymes. Thank goodness. I'm so glad.
Okay. That's a different answer. Thank you.
Yeah, let me go on a bit, though. There are 3 fruits that contain enzymes, proteins, that function with other proteins to make those other proteins relax. One of them you can buy in the supermarket. It's called Adolph's Meat Tenderizer, and is papain, an enzyme from papaya. And when put on meat, it causes the protein of the meat to relax, and it causes tough cuts of meat to be tender. Another one is bromelain, found in pineapple. If you've ever eaten raw pineapple, you know that bromelain digests meat very, very well. It's happy to digest your tongue, your lips, too, huh?
Oh.
You overeat it on pineapple, your mouth starts getting digested. Right? That's why we have pineapple with Christmas ham, say. Right? Because it helps us to deal with the ham. And there is an enzyme whose name I have chosen not to remember because it's long and complicated, that's in kiwi fruit. And somebody at a conference who's an elk hunter told me that he had put a very tough piece of elk in a plastic storage container with 3 cut-up kiwis, and 24 hours later he went back and there was a bone sitting in meat soup. And next year he was only going to use 1 kiwi because he actually had wanted to roast that piece of meat, not turn it into soup. So these 3 enzymes do what? They digest meat. And that's wonderful because that takes place in the stomach. So before the hydrochloric acid destroys these enzymes are effective in helping us to deal with the meat. Furthermore, any animal protein that we eat contains its own enzymes, which help us to digest that particular protein. In other words, they are helper proteins. Thus, it is ideal to consume raw milk, raw yogurt, raw milk cheeses, raw meat, raw fish, raw eggs, and raw insects, because these things contain helper proteins, enzymes that help us digest the proteins. There are, however, no proteins that need help in plants, and therefore eating raw plants is simply a waste of the plant and a waste of your effort, because there's no nutrition of any kind available from raw plants.
So, what does cooking do to plants to make them digestible?
It breaks down the cell wall so that we can get to the nutrition, and it doesn't have to be cooking. When the cell wall has been broken, we can see that there's a color change and a texture change. And so we know that freezing also breaks the cell wall. We know that fermentation breaks the cell wall, that dehydration breaks the cell wall, or that covering something in oil also breaks the cell wall. These are the 5 primary ways to break the cell wall and to get nutrition from our plant foods: subjected to heat, subjected to freezing cold, fermented, dehydrated, or cover it in oil.
So that's why you add salad dressing to salads?
And that's why if you want to get any benefit from your salad, you will put at least 2 tablespoons of oil or half an avocado on your salad.
Okay, thank you. My next question is actually our last question. Hippocrates said, "Let your food be medicine, and let your medicine be your food." Many common foods have been used to treat illness, and I've heard that garlic, onions, lemon, ginger, and thyme being used for different things. What foods do you recommend to support health?
It is true. Hippocrates.
Thank you.
It's all right. Did say let your medicine be your food. However, when did Hippocrates live?
Long ago?
3,000 years ago?
Yes.
There weren't any drugs. There weren't any medicines besides herbal medicines. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? So different time, different country, different things. Again, one of the things that you've heard me agitating against, herbs are not drugs with green coats on. They are complicated conglomerations of a great many constituents that have a great many different effects. Each and every plant, just like each and every human being, is absolutely able to work on its own. They do not need to ever be combined. However, the part of the plant that we want to choose, the time when we want to harvest it, the method of preparation, and the amount that we take are all critical factors that we must know in order to use that well. I had a young mother call me up, absolutely hysterical. She had read that garlic was a good medicine if a baby had a cough. So she took garlic, raw garlic, sliced it up, and put it on her baby's chest. And when she took it off her baby's chest, she took off all of the skin as well, because fresh raw garlic on the skin is a caustic. So we can't simply say this food is a medicine. We have to say, what part? When have we harvested? How are we preparing it? And exactly how are we using it or taking it? My new book down there, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way, has chapters on all of the prevalent reproductive cancers, each of which is preceded by a chapter about preventing that particular cancer. And a great many of those preventatives are, in fact, food. Just for instance, in the chapter Preventing Prostate Cancer, we find foods such as cooked tomatoes, cooked cabbage family plants, cooked apples, pomegranate juice, green tea, garlic, onions, red clover infusion, lentils, right? Fatty fish, kelp, avocados, flax seeds, walnuts, pecans, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, stinging nettle. All right, we see what is the connection between meat, and we find that it is processed meat that is the problem, not meat in general. Recent studies find there is no association with the amount of red meat eaten, nor the method of cooking the meat, but that any meat which is well done will raise the risk of cancer. So these are just a few of the possibilities when we're looking specifically at preventing prostate cancer or in general.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And I think that this is why people find my book so helpful, because as you see, many times I've actually simply picked up the book and read to you from the book. I like to give people clear, coherent, and simple ways to function. Down there, Sexual and Reproductive Health for Men and Women, The Wise Woman Way builds on the strength of my previous books, where we use the 6 steps of healing, so it's true integrative medicine, where Grandmother Growth talks to us, but in down there, she's joined by Grandfather Growth, who also talks to my books have always been beautifully illustrated by Alan McKnight, who really outdid himself now. He illustrated it for 150 herbs, but he also did some magnificent anatomical illustrations for this book, some of which are being used by medical professionals because they show the relationships of the organs so absolutely clearly. And one of the new features in this book are help boxes, so that if you have a problem, you can simply open to that chapter, and right there is a little box that says, do these 3 or 4 things, boop, 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 and this is when you can expect results. I've also included her stories and his stories, so we get both history and herstory, and both the men's and the women's things, because I believe that story medicine is such an important medicine, and that talking to you like this tonight and sharing our stories is one of the most important things that we do to promote health.
Thank you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed listening to you. I had not listened to you before, and this has been wonderful.
Herbal medicine is people's medicine. It's the medicine right outside our doors, whether we live in the city or the country. There are plants that most people call weeds that are available to every single one of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Green Meadow. And Susan, thank you for taking us on a journey through your connection to the earth and her green allies, and for sharing your wisdom towards a sustainable and natural way of life. I will leave you with a poem titled Herb Woman by Eleanor C. Koenig. Roots and herbs she gathers, morning, night, and noon, by the raising dog star underneath the moon. In her fragrant kitchen, while the lost world sleeps, gentle midnight priestess, she mixes and steeps, shakes the leafy brethren, sorts and scrapes with skill, on her vibrant fingers, wood and field and hill, poppy leaves and wormwood, peony petals spilt, dreamy hop flowers added, for a headache quilt. Hands only made for healing, nostrils made for smell, forehead wide and yearning, eyes fixed in a spell. With the loose prescriptions floating through her head, such are prayers she mutters ere she goes to bed. On behalf of Fox and all the members of the WebBot Forum, thank you. And in our tradition of loving and making pie, may you and yours have many delicious pies to look forward to.
Green blessings and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.